Greetings. I hope that you're having a fantastic day. Welcome to my my May/June update for Pan That Palette, Pan Those Eyeshadows. I really appreciate you giving me some of your time. I took a little bit longer because I'm going to get real. I haven't been wearing makeup every day, so I wanted a little bit more time before I came on here to give you an update, because I know with some of these palettes that I've been working with, the formulas are quite intense and it takes a long time. So as we get started, the palettes that I've been working with have been the Natasha Denona Triochrome palette, the Juvia's Place Nubian 3 Coral palette. I've also pulled out my ColourPop Grandeur palette, and then I need to give you a status update on what's going on with my Subculture palette. So exciting things, and I have a couple other shadows that I pulled in, but let's go on and start with the star of the show, and that has really been the Natasha Denona Triochrome palette. I'm gonna go on and insert a picture here of where I was when I updated you last time. The shades that I had been working with had been Vertex. I had gone through and started using Gorman, and I'd also played around with some mint looks, and then I really fell in love with a sunset kind of vibe. That is the look I'm wearing today, and to be honest, since I'm not wearing makeup every single day, I have stuck with this look for the times that I choose to wear makeup, because I really just wanted the momentum, and I wanted makeup that I just felt pretty in and I didn't have to really think about. And so this is the vibe that I'm really kind of going for, especially to make some progress going on in this Nubian 3 Coral palette. So that's where I was with Natasha Denona. This is where I currently am with this palette. And I have to tell you, the longer I use this palette, the more that I love it. I understand completely why Natasha Denona as a brand has the following that she's had for the years that she's been producing palettes, because her formula truly is incredible. And I know this palette in particular can be kind of polarizing. People either love it or they really are not fond of it, but the longer that I work with it, the more fond of it I become. The first shade that I predictably hit pan in was this highlighting cream shade over here called Vertex. It is a basic shade. There is nothing to get excited about, but it does a lovely job in your inner corners and your highlight, or if you're the type of person who loves to use base shadows, that is an ideal candidate for something like that, because it's going to do a beautiful job of blending out shadows, but it's not going to stand up independently where it's an obstruction to the rest of your look. Does that make sense? I don't think that's the way I wanted to word it, but we're gonna go with it. The next shade that I've been able to hit pan in and I have fallen in love with is this beautiful transition shade over here called Gorman. It is a warm brown, but there's a lot of rose to it. In fact, when I first blend it onto my crease area, it can look rather startling. And then once I apply the other shadows, it just blends beautifully, in particular with purple shadows. So it is a shade that I've learned to love. You can kind of see a little bit of it peeking, kind of going towards my inner corner, and then I blended the manganese matte purple on top of it, but it's just a gorgeous shadow. And that was one of the ones initially that I was a little bit intimidated by. I didn't really like it when I first started using it, but the more and more familiar I am with it, the more comfortable I am becoming with that shadow, and it is just beautiful. I totally understand why she chose that kind of a shade for this palette, and hopefully it's coming across well on camera, but really there's a whole lot of pink to it. It's not a flesh tone, it's not like warm brown, but it's not like a cool tone brown either. It's just, there's a lot of pink to it, and hopefully you see that. And it's covering up a bruise on my hand, so that may come off a little bit weird, but in other words, it's a lovely shade. Then the next shades that I have been working very consistently with have been this matte purple called Manganese over here. That is another shadow that really kind of pleasantly surprised me. It wasn't something that I initially gravitated towards. I mean, I remember panning something similar out of the Kat Von D Me Vita Look remix palette years ago, but when I used a shade like that, then I paired it with kind of a more light pink shimmery kind of vibe, and I had like a whole, I guess you could say, like unicorn vibe to my makeup. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. Like, it was much more vibrant than this kind of neutral look that I'm going for now, because I wanted to tone it down with the warmer shadows. But this shadow right here has a little bit more, I would say a little bit more pink to it necessarily than blue. And so it really stands up well when you want to pair it with oranges or peach or reds or things like that. It stands up alone a little bit better, whereas this purple over here is a little bit more cooler tones. So love, love, love this. It has definitely been my favorite crease shade of late. I have it kind of going on, and then I've deepened it up with an Anastasia shade that I will show you in just a minute. But lovely, lovely color. And lastly has been my relationship over here with Diatonic. And it's this gorgeous coral shade. I hope it's coming across on camera. It's absolutely lovely, but one of my initial thoughts on it was, man, it fades a ton. This is what it looks like on the hand. I apologize, I'm still working on the lighting because it is quite dreary outside, and then I've got bright lights going on in here. But the Diatonic shade, what I have realized about it is as you get further into the shadow and use it, you know, consistently, there is less fading once you get down into the pan. So I don't know if it's just that formula with the initial layer of eyeshadow that it just didn't last, but I am not noticing the fading issues anymore that I did in those first beginning couple of weeks. So I'm proud to report that. I wanted to let you know in case this is a palette that you have in your collection. So as far as I'm going to continue working on this palette, since I've hit pan in 2 shades now between Vertex and Gorman, I only have one more shadow left to hit pan in this palette before I can go on and call it good for now. So I'm kind of hoping it's going to be in this manganese shade, just because that would be quite an accomplishment. I do use this on my crease area. I also use this to line my lower lash line to give it a stronger purple. So we'll see how that's gonna go. I don't know if I'm necessarily gonna hit pan on Diatonic. We'll see. The way that I've been using that is I blend out my crease with it just to kind of warm up the look. And I've also been going through and using it as a blush. I'm wearing it currently on my cheeks today. It gives a nice, subtle, matte blushiness to the cheeks. It's not too orange. It has a little bit of pink in it. But it definitely, if you try it as a blush, you're gonna wanna play around with it a little bit with your bronzers and all that, because it can kind of translate a little bit orange on the skin. So just be mindful of that. But that's where we are with that. Not rolling out anything just yet. We're gonna keep going and see if maybe I can hit pan by the middle of July with this palette, and then see if we can move on with another look from it. All right, and that takes us into our next palette. That is the Nubian 3 Coral palette. Let me insert a picture here of where I was back in May. I have really been enjoying this palette. I've kind of bounced around a little bit. You know, I started off using like the matte brown in the palette, then I went into that beautiful peachy coral shade in the bottom. I've used a couple of the shades as blush, but really I went intensely in on the beautiful peach shimmery shade. So this is where I am, and as you can see, I have been able to hit my first pan in the Juvia's Place palette, which is really interesting to note. These pans are a lot more shallow than I thought they were. So kind of a fun fact, if you're wanting shades that are fairly consistent to pan, if you're into wearing similar looks on a regular basis, if you focus in on the Juvia's Place shadows, you can hit pan in the shimmery shades quite quickly. I mean, it'll only take you, you know, a couple weeks, maybe a couple months. So that was a pleasant thought. I'm gonna go on and continue working on this shadow until hopefully I hit pan and manganese, we'll see. And then I'm going to go on and I've kind of got my eye on this shadow over here, but I don't know how that would necessarily work with the Triochrome palette or going into that ColourPop Grandeur palette. But I kind of had my eye on this beautiful shadow right here, just because it kind of has a little bit of rose gold to it. And I also thought about this intense brown right here, but we'll see. We shall see. So that's where I am with Juvia's Place. I'm enjoying this formula. I love that I get the most intensity now that I've kind of gotten down into the pan. I'm going back to my e.l.f. C shader brush it's a flat shader brush to apply it to my lid. For a while, I was a little bit on the struggle bus with that shadow because I would apply it with my finger or with a sponge tip applicator or with a brush, and it would just be patchy. Like in some areas on my lid, it would have the intense color of the peach and the coral, but then other parts of it would be just solid white. It was kind of a weird thing. And then I tried foiling it for a little bit. That was great, but at the same time that packed on more eyeshadow than I wanted to get the effect that I wanted it to. But like I said, once I kind of got down into the pan and just consistently used it, it's very, very soft and creamy and buttery, and it does apply quite evenly now to the eyes. It's what I've got going on my lids today, and I absolutely love it. So there we are with the Juvia's Nubian 3 Coral. Then that takes us into what's going on in terms of some other shadows that I brought in. Like as I hit pan and vertex, I went back and I decided to pull out a L'Oreal single. This is one of my favorite highlighting shades of all time. It is the Color Riche eyeshadow in the shade Paris Beach 200. You can still find these at the drugstore, even though these shadows have been on the market quite a long time. So I've had this in my collection. I wanted to go on and see what kind of progress I could make. But it's just a beautiful, shimmery, creamy shade. It does a beautiful effect of just brightening up my inner corner and brightening up my brow bone. If you wanted to, it also makes a gorgeous face highlight. And again, drugstore prices, this is an awesome find to pick up and add to your collection. So I just want to see where I can make it in this particular pan, because I have several of these in my backup collections that I want to just kind of get through. Then another thing that I was able to make progress on is my Maybelline Made for Mocha. I hit pan in a second portion of the pan. I like using this in my eyebrows on a regular basis. So this pan I did by using the shadow in my outer V to blend everything out, and then I would go through and use this to line my eyes and then use it in my brows, and then I went on and started another pan to just create another dent in the in the overall shadow using this in my brows, and then now I'm focusing on starting a dip in the middle. So there we are with Made for Mocha. Love this shadow. It's one of my absolute favorites, and again, drugstore prices, you can't be beat. These Maybelline singles are so pigmented and creamy, and they last well all day, and just the formula is lovely. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Then we get into Subculture. Let me show you where I was last update, because I talked about using Rowdy, I talked about using Axis, and I talked about using Destiny. So as we get into where I currently am with this palette, this is exciting because, as you can see, Rowdy is done. I loved going through using it in my outer corner. I would use it to line my upper lash line over just a black liner, or sometimes I would go through with a plum liner. I knew that was going to be an easy fix. I went on and got a backup shadow because I missed it so much. It's not quite as bluish purple as this Rowdy shade was, but it does the job. And again, I'm thrilled that I can make some further progress on this palette. I was also able to go through and use Axis a couple of times as I went through with the mint shade from the Natasha Denona Triochrome palette. I'm kind of keeping that look in my back pocket to go to as I get through more of the sunset vibes. So that's going to be a look I post to Get Ready With Me. Also, I owe you some Get Ready With Me's. It's just time has gotten away from me. I'm totally sorry about that. I need to get on it and get those filmed for you. The other shadow that I was able to make a little bit more progress on is Destiny. Over here, I wore it a couple of times. Again, with that mint shadow, just to kind of see what sort of a vibe that I wanted. I didn't use too much of it, but I've gone through and cleared out a little bit more of the pan, just because every time I use that shadow, it is quite crumbly. So that's where I am currently with Subculture. I mean, honestly, the next time I get back to this palette, the shades that I expect to use up are going to be Destiny and Axis, and that'll give me 2 more pans in this palette, but I'm thrilled that Rowdy is done, even though I do miss that shadow. So that being said, I went through on Ulta's website and I tried to find the closest thing I could to a Rowdy, just by checking like Temptalia's site for dupes and whatnot, and there isn't really a whole lot in terms of like the intense bluish purple that Rowdy was. The closest thing I got to was buying a single of Anastasia's eyeshadow in Deep Plum. This is more brown than Rowdy, but it does a nice job along with this kind of a sunset vibe. So the Deep Plum is what I currently have going on in my outer corner. I've lined my upper lash line with it. It is a gorgeous shadow, but I mean, I checked from all sorts of different brands like MAC, Urban Decay. I checked some indie brands, anything I could find of like dupes to Rowdy, and nothing came quite as close when I saw it in person. So I went on and I was like, well, at least if I go with the same formula of, staying with Anastasia Beverly Hills, maybe I'll get an effect I want. And it's close. It's not quite as bright and intense as I loved and appreciated from Rowdy, but it does the job. So Soft Plum, if you're looking for a backup to Rowdy, is about as close as I was able to get. If you have something even better, let me know, because I really and truly do miss that shadow because it was so great. Maybe part of it was the formula that I'm missing too, just because it was so soft and so creamy and so buttery, even though it could be a hot mess to work with. It's just that pigmentation and that particular shade of purple was just gorgeous, and I miss it. All right, so then getting into the last palette, my ColourPop Grandeur palette. I used it a couple of times, but honestly, I don't have any progress to show you yet on this palette. I did work with it a little bit. I went through and I used the transition shade while I was kind of on the fence with Gorman. And then once I fell in love with Gorman, I've just stayed consistently with that. So I've used this shade a couple of times. I've tried this shade a couple of times because I tried it in my brows. It's a little too shimmery. I'm not super fond of it. So it's going to be a straight eyeshadow for me. And then I went through with this kind of actually, this is the transition shade. This is a little bit of a deeper brown. One of the days I went through, I used this in my crease. I used this to deepen everything up, and I used this gold shade on my lid. And I liked it, but I wasn't thrilled with it. Maybe I was just not in the mood for neutrals that day. I don't know, but I'm gonna have to play around with this palette a little bit more, because that day that I used this completely to do my makeup, I was kind of a little bit bored with the look. I just wasn't feeling it. I don't know. So I need to spend some more time with this palette and really get to know it and get to know the ColourPop formula and just spend time. I really have to work with products and really get to know them to base my opinion on it before I truly have thoughts on those eyeshadows and how they work with other things. So that about wraps it up. No new rollouts into this particular month because I've got a lot to work with as it is. So I'm gonna go on and keep the main focus of my palettes. Definitely these two. We'll see about hitting pan on that deep plum shade from Anastasia. And then as I keep going, I think the next combination is gonna be really these two palettes, and then I'll pull in something at that point. So hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully I will have some more pan by the time I update you coming up at the end of June, July. So I have to admit, I've been craving watching Get Ready With Me's, just wanting inspiration, wanting to feel motivated to wear makeup again, because even though things are getting more back to normal, I still I have days where I'm just like, do I want to wear makeup? Sure. And if I don't, I'm just not bothered by it. You know what I mean? So I want to get motivated to get back into my collection and really get back into the habit of using my things. So I hope you are too. And perhaps those videos will give you some ideas for your makeup for the day. So until next time, take care. And I look forward to catching up with you soon. Adios.